You guys see everything and hear everything?
Yes. Yes.
Cool.
Loggers.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about loggers today. I'll try to be quick in case Mr. Janice shows up. My apologies for last month. I wasn't feeling well, so moving forward as usual, pale, amber, and dark loggers. I'm going to start off with a very quick history lesson. So loggers originated in the Bavarian Alps, and so generally what happened is the monks were brewing beer, and they took it and they stored it in caves where it was nice and cold and dark so that they could drink it later in the beer. If anybody has ever cold crashed a beer, you know what happens. Things sink down to the bottom. These conditions selected for a different type of yeast that eventually came to dominate the lager style. Lager literally means to store beers. So this new type of beer had this new type of yeast called S. pastorianus. I gotta drop some yeast knowledge for you guys. So generally, lagers are brewed with a bottom fermenting yeast, but not always. There's a couple exceptions. So pale European lagers are the first category here. Kolsch, Helles, Festbier, and Munich Helles. Kolsch is a very crisp top fermented beer. This is our first exception to the bottom fermenting rule. It's very crisp. It's very grainy and sweet though. And there's a little bit of subtle fruits in there. A Helles export beer, sorry, a little bit stronger, a little bit sweeter, but even though it's a little bit maltier, it's still in a very good balance with the hops. Helles has a different name than it goes by sometimes. It's called a Dortmunder. And then there's a Fest beer. This is the modern beer that if you go to Oktoberfest, this is what you're going to drink. It's a very clean, malty beer. It's stronger, but it's still drinkable. And then there's a Munich Helles, which is very clean. If you're noticing a theme here, everything is very clean. It's refreshing. It's still malt forward, but it's not sweet. It's very dry. Amber lagers, there's going to be two different slides on amber lagers here. We have the international amber lagers, Marzen and Czech amber lager. International amber lager is very caramelly, very toasty. In these amber lagers, you're going to get more malt flavor coming through, but the common theme always is that there's just enough hops to balance it. It's not too malty and it's not too hoppy. Marzen is the traditional Oktoberfest beer. It's not served nowadays, but there are certain places where you can still find it if you're going to an Oktoberfest. It still has a very malty, bready, caramelly profile, and there's a little bit more alcohol in there. And then we have the Czech amber lagers, which are more complex, getting a little bit darker there, getting a little bit hoppier, but they're a little bit more restrained on the alcohol side than the other ones. But with the Czech style, as opposed to the German style, we have a little bit more of like a berry, a dark fruit kind of flavor going on there. Continuing with the amber lagers, alt beer. Alt means old, and so this is one of the other exceptions to the bottom fermenting rule. Alt beers are brewed with a top fermenting yeast, and alt beers are quite hoppy. They can go up to like 50 IBUs. Again, we're getting some fruity esters here. Keller beer. Keller beer, you have to specify the style when you're entering it. There's two different types. There's a Helles and a Marzen. And so depending on that, you're going to have a very, very wide range of colors. So if you look up at the SRM up the top, the yellow bar, that's why it's so big. It's because there's the two different variations of the two. But still, you have the hops in balance to combat the malt profile. And then we have the Vienna lagers, which is still getting to be more complex in the malt profile, although not quite as much as an alt beer. And the distinguishing factor of a Vienna lager is that you've got that like Maillard kind of a flavor going on. It's got very, very almost cloyingly sweet from that. Dark lager. One of these is an exception to the top fermenting rule, or sorry, to the bottom fermenting rule as well. And that is Schwarzbier, which is the yellow bar on the graphs. And so Schwarzbier, oh, sorry, I skipped one. International dark lagers is the first one. They're not as sweet as the amber lagers. Very, very little hop there, but very, very high carbonation. And you can have a little bit of DMS in here, and it's okay. So Schwarzbier now can be brewed with a top fermenting yeast like a traditional ale. Moderate malt and aroma and flavor. You're getting more into the chocolate now with these next couple of beers, more like it's kind of a stout profile, but not as roasty. Munich Dunkel is much, much more into the chocolate. And this one has more of a Maillard flavor as well. And when you get into the Munich Dunkel, you're starting to get to the point where you're not just using hops to balance, you're actually picking up the hops and you're appreciating those flavors for what they are. Czech dark lagers are a little bit darker than the other ones, a little bit darker, a little bit stronger in the hops, but a little bit flatter, like we saw with the amber one as well. But it still has a really, really nice, deep, complex malt profile. Okay, and I know that we had Chris Saunders, I think, judging a couple of the categories. So he has one of the examples in the recipe database. It's a Munich Hells, and Matt King, I think, won a couple of medals in the competition. So we have one of his recipes on the database as well. We have several examples. A lot of these styles are German, and if you head especially out into the Waterloo region, there's a lot of breweries that do a very phenomenal example of German styles, including the ones here. So we have Waterloo, we have Gaslight Hells, People's Pint, Alkine Dunkel. I've included the Czech dark lager here as well. And there's Wellington has their Helles as well, which is wonderful, and I'm drinking that right now. Next month, we're going to talk about porters and stouts. And we do have, I'm pretty sure Colin is in here somewhere. We have one of his beers in the stout category. We have Lactose Intolerant. And one of the club brews from back in the day before I was a member, when the club used to brew at meetings, there's a rye oatmeal stout that everybody did together. I haven't done it, but I think Eric can probably attest that it's pretty good. I think that's all I got. How do I stop sharing?
I think it's
Quick question. What's the ruling on Baltic Porter in terms of top fermenting or bottom fermenting?
I think it's bottom fermenting.
Okay, but you didn't include it, so I was just curious.
it's for October, right? It's next month.
Did I not include Baltic
Well,
Porter?
no, I know you're going to get to Baltic Porter and your stouts and porters, but I didn't see it listed
Oh, yeah.
in this category.
Oh,
so
is it? Yeah.
I just saw it scroll by. A couple slides forward.
No, next slide. Yeah, next slide.
Yeah, next slide, or 2 slides. Yeah.
There it is.
Forward.
Right.
No, that's for next month under porters and stouts, but under lagers, it wasn't included, so I was curious.
Oh yeah, fermented with the lager yeast, but we put it under porter for Bruce then because it's a porter.
Fair enough, fair enough. I just wondered there's been some people that kind of get all up in the arms about it. So I was kind of curious what the opinion was here.
Okay, thanks, Emily. I'm going to stop the
Thank you.
recording or pause the recording now, and then as soon as I find out where my button is.